Hello, my name is Caitlin Campsmith, and this is my final project for Western Civilization 1 at Houston Christian University. And I will obviously be choosing today for my final project presentation style, the style of documentary. So, with that being said, we can get to the question that I will be answering throughout this video, being what impact did the Black Death have on medieval Europe? So, the Black Death, also called Black Plague, bubonic plague, or sometimes just called the plague, was deadly and highly contagious disease that spread through Europe in the mid 14th century. There's some argument among scholars as to the exact nature of how the plague spread and the nature of the plague, but the prevailing theory is that it was a bacterial disease carried by fleas on rats that came over by ship on trade routes from Asia. So, first and foremost, we have to address two things about the name the Black Plague. So, the name the Black Plague did not come about until actually later on, when scientists were looking back and writing about the experience. During the time of the Black Plague, people actually called it the Great Mortality or the Great Pestilence. And then sometimes people would call it the Blue Sickness. So that was a phrase developed by historians and scientists that were writing about it later. And then it also, some people can think that, maybe it's called the Black Death because, well, that's the color that people turned when they died. Or it's commonly known that there were boils and large tumor looking it was a lump or a buboes, right, around the lymph nodes, or so often around the armpit or the groin. So people were thinking that maybe those were black, but in fact, that was not the reason either. It was called the Black Death because of how awful it was. It was a terrible experience. It was dark. It was black. It was terrifying. So that's first and foremost. And then if we go to the theory on the fleas being the reason, fleas from the rats being the reason that that the plague was spreading so quickly and so devastatingly, was the theory was that the fleas would live on the rats and then they would jump onto, like, if any fleas were to jump onto a human being and bite them, that is how the plague was transferred. So, moving along. So estimates of the number of people killed by the Black Death in Europe during this time vary greatly, but it's generally believed that about half of the population, or perhaps more, were lost in just a few years' time. On a more local level, many individual villages lost up to 75 or 80% of their inhabitants. So in this regard, I have a picture that kind of demonstrates how devastating this was, right? Okay, which actually refers to the way that art styles changed because of the Black Death. A lot of the time, art would generally reflect a more death-centered they would be paintings, music, whatever. It was a lot more death-centered. Oh, let's see. In an agrarian sorry, that's a difficult word, feudal system, the loss of so much of the labor force affected everything in the economy, all the way up to the landowners, rulers, and the church. This led to significant social, cultural and political upheaval. No one, another question. What was the impact of the Black Death on culture, art, and literature? So, specifically, culture, art, and literature. Um, so, those who survived were left in fear, had lost their families, and were left having to pick up the pieces of their devastated world. So, understandably, they were dealing with depression and all sorts of grief and just major, there were changes upon changes upon changes. So songs, poetry, all of that, fear was a key piece of that just because of the experience of the quickness of the Black Plague spreading and just how many people it took out, really. A new type of performance art emerged known as the danse macabre, which may have originally featured people dancing with others dressed as skeletons to suggest imminent death, but morphed into other visual and artistic forms. Visual arts like paintings and drawings suddenly took on this dark tone with images of bodies laying in the streets and the presence of death, personified by these animated skeletons looming ominously over the survivors, dancing with them, or even in one famous case, challenging them to a game of chess, likely with their life being the prize. So, this is an example of that picture. So, playing with a skeleton. So that was a large part of how that was affected. How did the enormous loss of life affect religious faith and capital C church power? So, very little was understood about this at the time. It was simply taking people out, and it was really taking out clergymen faster than they could be replaced by, I guess, how you would say, more experienced clergymen that would be wise enough to, give the people advice that they were really truly seeking at the time. That plus the fact that even before then, the capital C church, like Catholicism, all of that, they were going down more of a wealth and power type of. They were becoming more secular in what they were presenting to the public, to the church, the body. And so their reputation was already kind of going down, and so by the time all of this was going around and many people were dying, and the peasants, is what they were known as at the time, the lay people, if you will, they began to notice that the church was being affected in the same way that they were, and had just had the same amount of answers as the lay people tended to have, which was not a lot. And so generally, this started a larger push toward, I don't know how to say the word it's not flagellants. Oh gosh. Yeah. It's a word that means they were going around and doing their own evangelical missions while they would and they would travel from city to city doing so, and they were whipping their own backs, with the same type of material that Jesus himself was whipped with. So, and then they were what ended up happening was people were more inclined to have more of a personal relationship with the Lord, instead of leaning so heavily on what the church was saying and depending on them so much. And I will show a picture of that. But all in all, this shows us. And so the clergymen were having to go out and really truly enter into the cities, because people really weren't coming to the church anymore. which was a huge devastation to the church, and a lot of churches closed and all of that. So, and that is a picture of them going out to the streets, and also where you can see lay people. So there's only one clergyman, and then there's lay people everywhere, tending to people dying. They would often have to hear out the confessions of the dying as lay people to, you know, have their souls go in rest, and be saved. So, all in all, conclusion would be that it is so clear that medieval Europe was just drastically different than 20 years, even 20 years after the Black Death, and the way that the economy was shifted, and just all of the things that were listed and mentioned earlier in the video. Thank you so much.